Hello, friends. Welcome to the Eternal Optimist podcast. Today, I'm your host, Matt Drinkon, and today on the podcast, we have Mr. Les McDaniel. Les, here's a little background on him. He's an amazing human. He's 48 years of age, 27 years married to his lovely wife, Heatherly, with 4 children and a bonus son in law. He's very competitive. I first met him at the Front Row Dads event and at one of our retreats, where he taught me the ways of the Trader Joe's sliced mangoes. He's also in the exchange community as a facilitator. And just Les is such an incredible human being. In this discussion, we're going to go deep in a number of places. He is someone who's truly overcome many challenges. Some of those challenges, if you can imagine, he was a boy growing up named Leslie. If that doesn't say it all right there, he is not as tall as the average human. So he grew up shorter, a little bit smaller, with the name Les. So just imagine that being the place we start. There was opportunities with bullies in school, and he chronicles part of that in our discussion. Also, his wife had a stroke. That was an incredibly challenging time in both their lives, and how they came back together from that. He chronicles that in our discussion as well. One thing that you should know about Les is that he's a very humble person, so he won't talk about himself with great accolades. And I will gladly share a couple of his accolades. When he was in real estate, he was involved in one of the largest corporate real estate deals in the history of his organization. This is back in Texas a number of years ago, and so he's had massive success in real estate. He also now is a coach, and I'll lead you to his website, and he'll give you some information on how to connect with them. But Les is just an amazing human being. He's a great person to listen to challenges, because he's got a great heart for loving and caring about all people. Some things we talk about today on the discussion: if you can name the problem, you can understand the solution. He likes to ask a lot of questions to get to understand exactly what it is that the problem is before he tackles it. When you're having chaos, make something of it. Les is someone who doesn't sit still. He likes to continue to take positive action towards whatever it is the objective is. He believes going headfirst into your fears. He chronicles his story today in the podcast. He's always open, and he's always willing to be curious. So get ready, buckle your seats in for a shallow dive at first, and it gets deep fast in this discussion. This is a truly amazing human being I love very much. His name's Les McDaniel.
Hello, and welcome to the Eternal Optimist Podcast, the show for optimists by optimists. This is the show for people who see the good in the world and want to make a positive difference in the lives of their families and communities. Each week, you'll hear inspiring stories that will get you thinking bigger and playing more offense in life. With your host and high-performance coach, Matt Drinkon.
And here we go, my friend Les McDaniel. Good morning, Les.
Good morning, sir. How are you, coach?
We are fantastic today. It is great to have you on. I've been looking forward to this for some time. You're one of my favorite people in the universe, so no pressure. Let's have a good time today. How the heck are you today, my friend?
I'm doing pretty well today. Life is just a wonderful roller coaster ride that I enjoy. I'm finding ways to find joy in almost all circumstances. So getting to do stuff like this with you makes it even all the more fun.
Well, you're too kind. I'd love to dive a little bit deeper and just kind of get right into it right away. When you say that you're finding joy and you're able to find circumstances and find joy in the circumstance, what do you mean by that? What's an example?
Oh my goodness, there's so many different examples, but I think that we live in a world that has a desire to live in one of two dualities, which I guess there would only be two since it's a dual thing. But it's good and bad, or right versus wrong, or joy versus sadness, and there's this real struggle that I think that our world has, and that I'm dealing with in my own life, which is, my wife has got she's got chronic myeloid leukemia. I've just recently kind of discovered that some of my past traumas in my own life are not totally fully healed, and yet there's not a resistance in me to wanting to to welcome that challenge, to welcome her cancer, to really begin to dive into what that looks like. Eh, well, we're jumping right in, aren't we? But I'll tell you that one of the I was listening to Ram Dass this morning, not live, of course, but it was he has this saying that is, um, all suffering is showing you is where your mind is still clinging. And the idea for me is very much that is a deep rooted thing within me, that I recognize that anytime that I feel sad or I'm suffering, and you can even be suffering in joy, honestly, but anytime I feel that, what is really going on deep within me is um, this thing that I'm holding on to, this idea of what life should be, as opposed to the reality that is present at this particular stage in my life. And we have a lot of things going on besides that. We got, my son is leaving the nest, if you will, and he's the last of my four kids to leave the nest this summer. And there's this sense of excitement that comes along with that, and a sense of sadness. So it's like there's both of these things walking hand in hand at all times in our world. There's never a situation where something is completely joyful. It's always letting go of something in order to gain something. And so I think the joy for me is living kind of as best as I can, and imperfectly, with an open hand, not with closed fists tightly held, so that, onto whatever it is that I think I should have, but just being open to what is ever next. And it is it's literally like a roller coaster, where you're rising to the top of that roller coaster and you start to grip onto this, the whatever it's called, the rails. And then there's a sense in which you get over that hump, and the joy comes, and all of a sudden you can start to feel your hands lift up in the air and feel that joy of that freedom, just that free fall, and knowing that, oh, this is great. I know not everybody
Yes.
feels that way about it, but it is
Well,
kind of
you went deep fast, Les.
dude, I only go
Wow,
deep
I didn't
fast
even ask the
once.
question about what are the challenges that you've overcome in your life. You just went straight into one, and
But
thanks
that's
for
where
sharing
joy
that with
is,
us.
right? That's where
That-
joy is. So how else could I describe it?
Well, I think that a lot of people, that might be a foreign concept of, this is a great challenge. This is something that has a potential for a lot of pain. It is a lot of pain when you say your wife and you say cancer. That certainly brings up kind of a queasy feeling in my stomach. It feels painful to even talk about that. And your next statement afterwards is around, being able to find the joy in things. And I'd love to just back up for a second, since you took the ball and you ran with it, man. Well, let's back up a second. And I'd love to outline, some of these challenges that you've had in your life, and, what they've taught you, and how you've gotten to this place where you are in your life right now. So could you back up for a second and share with us what are some of the challenges you faced? And then let's kind of deconstruct what they've taught you, and how you've maintained joy throughout.
Understand. I um I mean, it is a deep subject, and I really I've been on this journey of depth, if you will, for quite some time. And and so it's really kind of hard, especially considering that even recently I've come into a group of guys that have just been really supportive of me, and not to mention the front row dads. That's another group of guys that's been incredibly supportive to me. But there is my life hasn't been a bowl of cherries, or whatever the great sayings are, that it's always easy. I've been very blessed, but it's blessed because of how I think I've decided to look at life. My quest in pursuit of how I want to see the world versus what maybe is really playing out is probably where that comes in. But I've never been a kid. I mean, even as a kid, I should say, I was never someone who just was like status quo. I was born into this world, a runt named Leslie. that's where that's where it kind of starts.
That's where it began right there, Les.
I mean, you are born and you're the smallest kid in your class for years and years and years. Uh, you're on the first day of school. Your teacher says Leslie McDaniel, and you're like, oh shit, that's me. And then it's less, and like less is much better. I mean, that's the complete opposite of more. And big, it's not necessarily something that we always think of as positive in our worlds. And but it created in me a deep curiosity around people and how to navigate that world where I didn't get my butt handed to me every day by bullies. And so I learned how to befriend them. I learned how to connect with each and every person that was in my world, and how to survive and thrive in many ways just as a result of that. I was a funny kid. Probably more out of I was able to take the jokes first and foremost, and then I learned how to start to create a world where I could make people laugh, my teachers laugh. I was kind of the class clown that they loved. Um, but it also came with a lot of struggle. I had some. I've had many a times where I was raised in the church, and the church was. I always took things that were in Scripture very literally. I really felt deep down in my soul that we were supposed to live this particular way that Jesus lived. And at that time, that's all I really knew was this particular way of like, this is how we live. And I would ask questions, and they were basic ones like, well, why isn't that homeless guy coming to church with us? And wait, isn't that homeless guy our neighbor? Shouldn't we love him too? And or I would just try to understand, people and why they would do things the way they would do them. And I would know people that seemed really good on the outside, but I could hear this judgment that would sometimes come from the inside that sounded like, yeah, but they kind of have to do do certain things and conform to certain patterns. Well, that made me a target too. That made me a little bit of a target because I was always trying to find ways to open the door to people. Um, and and when it felt like
Well, no less. If I could interrupt you for a
yeah,
sec. When
please.
you say it made you a target too, can you think back to an incident or a time where there was a bully or where you were a target, something that maybe the audience can relate to in the moment? Can you describe that for us?
I'm trying to let me see if I can go back in way back.
And
I
for those of you listening right now, Les, he is not that old. I believe Les, you're right about 45 right now, I believe.
I appreciate that. 48, 48.
48. Okay.
Yeah, 48.
Okay.
Um, you know, I don't know. Let me see if I can go. I haven't thought about one that goes way back, but I there were many times in my life where I found myself standing up for people that were in the midst of getting bullied. I do have one. I do have one. One of my good friends, one of my best friends when I was in high school, um, decided he thought it would really be a good idea to get in a fight with a guy who was a quasi gangster and was a part of a gang in the wonderful West Texas town of Abilene, Texas. And I was like, what in the world are you doing? And so I knew what we were getting into. I knew this guy, I knew who was going to be showing up to this fight. And I'm like, I'm going to go with you, and we're not going to end up fighting. And, you know, I ended up, I showed up, and, I looked at the situation, and I saw one guy over here who had a particular sawed-off type weapon in his trench coat, which was just like hilarious that he thought he was hiding it. Several others who were packing, and the guy who was about to fight who had a knife. And I just literally looked at all these guys, and I'm like, guys, here's the deal. None of this is going to go down for the good for anyone. This guy, you who's got your gun, you're going to pull it out, and then what? You're gonna kill and shoot and over what? Two guys who are just trying to settle to something that's a disagreement about some girl or whatever it was at that particular time. And the irony of it is that I was both the friends of these guys that were also gangsters, because I told you I'd learned this way of being able to manage that. And I was also the friends with this other my best friend, and
How did they take that? How did the quasi gangsters take it when you said this? Like,
when
what are they looking like right now?
when I appealed to reason, literally they were all kind of like, oh yeah, I guess that makes sense. And in the end, there was some yelling, there was some screaming, and then everybody left, and it became nothing, and nobody fought, nobody swung a punch, and it was that way. And I would put myself in that place pretty regularly in defense of not just the person, like my it wasn't just about my best friend, it was about all of us in that moment. And I mean, looking back, it's like that was just stupid, right? It was like, why would you show up to a gang fight where there are going to be guns and knives with nothing except for your words?
Well, maybe. I mean, maybe you're young, you're in high school, you have this idealism, you want to stand up for people, stand up for the little guy, stand up for your friends. By the way, you are the little guy, and you're standing up for everyone. So you have this huge heart, and you want to do good. Let's keep moving. So you go through high school. We get a sense of who you are as a human. You've got a huge heart. What are some of the challenges that are coming in the next decade of your life in the 20s? What's next?
I mean, in my 20s, I was a good Christian kid. I'd kind of conformed to a lot of things. I was this kid who had actually and I got married young. I mean, I got married when I was 21 years old, and so I've been married 27 years now, or almost 27 years. And but I had an amazing world with her, and we were very involved in church at that particular juncture. And I remember knocking on some of the people's doors when they wouldn't show up for Wednesday night service and having this kind of gentle conversation about don't forsake the assembly and all this other kind of stuff that's pretty hilarious and conservative. But still within me was this reading of this great story and learning about this unbelievable mercy and grace. And as I started to do that, we started to work with people that were odd. Um, we had yeah, well, I worked with, we had a pregnant, at the same time my wife was pregnant, we had a pregnant drug addict who moved in with us, and we helped her, along that path just by loving her and just being there for her, helping her get into a house at one point. And, all of it was good and it was meaningful. There was a lot of things around that were just unique about how the church responded, which was not necessarily always the way that I thought it was or should be, versus the reality, which was that when you help people, it doesn't mean that they're going to turn out exactly like you hope. It doesn't mean that they're going to flip a switch and all of a sudden be good people, or conform to the way that I think it should look, what social standards are, and all that kind of stuff. And it was just that was of the many conversations that I've had over the years with people that were different than myself, and learning how to love people and realizing that some of their choices don't make them bad, that we are all just kind of products of our upbringing, of our circumstances, and that it's not easy. And that and in that it started to well up in me, like, what does this mean for us to be loving? What does it mean to love our neighbors, to love our enemies? Like, what does all this mean to really begin to love people, no matter what, no matter where they're at? And I was radical in some ways about that, and very defensive of those who were, uh, you know, actually, this just came to me recently from this group that just recognized this in me, and it's the underrepresented in our world. And and it's just such a deep thing for me that has been a problem in my own mind, because it leads me to be in many ways looked at like that, those who are underrepresented. And I don't like that, because I my family, and it would be like literally my family, my parents, if I was to say, hey, I really like this, I want to love this other person that's out here on the fringes and bring them into our home. And my parents be like, well, we don't want them here for Christmas or Thanksgiving. That's not what we do. And and it's and it's not that they aren't loving or wanting to be that for those people. It's just that it breaks them out of their mold of what it's supposed to, what they have created, and it makes us all uncomfortable, and it's always messy. This has been the way it has been for many points in my life, and it drove me to actually go back and get my master's of divinity at Abilene Christian, because I was just so tired of feeling like I was this oddball in how I was viewing things. And so um, and that was good and amazing and empowering, and at the same time it just created in many ways a greater distance between myself and those who, because it literally was like, yes, we are supposed to live this way, or we have the opportunity to live this way. It's not that we are supposed to, we can be those who provide that in the world.
It sounds to me like you in this time in your life in your 20s, you're still have this place of love, and I say still because you still have it today too. Like this is the core theme of you is love is what I'm feeling. And even when this ideal of love is something that others around you that are close to you that are important to you, even though they may not see it the exact same frame, you're willing to be uncomfortable because you believe so strongly in it. And it has presented challenges because others don't see it the same frame that you do. Uh,
and I'm just willing to be curious. I mean, I think I don't know who it was that told me when I was younger that there's nothing that I can do to shake God, to change God or to change the creator or whatever you want to call this source of all things. This thing that does what it does, and I can't break that, you know. And the more that I felt free to do that, the more it both sort of made me feel sometimes like an outsider, which wasn't true. It just is what it made me feel like. Because I my curiosity often made created fear in others because of we as humans we want to belong. We want that space of feeling like we belong somewhere. And when we start building that belonging around belief systems that are always shifting, always changing, it creates a little bit of uncertainty that we don't want. We want to be certain about this afterlife thing or whatever it might be. And we're willing to forego even happiness now, which is the most bizarre thing. We're willing to take on hell on earth for an eternity in heaven, for lack of a better word. And I don't. This is sounding awfully spiritual and religious, and everything is spiritual in my book. But I don't mean to be religious in this. This is life. Like the essence of life is this is fundamentally grounded in our ability to understand the tensions that we live in. And when we start to think that there is some way for us to capture um, a secure life in some form of understanding of God or a defining community or whatever, we start to alienate ourselves and others from what it truly means to be human, to be truly one with creation and with God. And I mean, we do this in all sorts of ways. I mean, look at the West compared to the East. We call the East woo, but and the West is what are we, dogmatically entrepreneurial and driven to success and driven to these other things. And these are all related to this very question of what it means to love one another. And when we are the more we separate ourselves into the mindset of creating our identity around certain beliefs or around certain practices, the more we start to create a world that separates us from the fullness that of joy that we really want to experience. It's like I'll give you one more example. Like when I seek security and I build up walls around myself and I have enough money and enough savings in a great business and a great, all these things. The first thing that I have to do is I have to set security systems up, security cameras. I need to arm myself and I need to find ways to maintain that security. That's not it. That's not security. That means I'm insecure. It means that I have to have all these things in order to be okay. And so it's the very thing that when we create that security that we think we want, at the very same moment we are embracing the fullness of insecurity because now we don't want to lose it. It's that holding on tight to the things that we have without a flexibility for something else to come along. And so that's suffering. It's minor and it may be luxuriously suffering. It may be all sorts of things, but it's still suffering because we have this fear of losing what we've gained.
Huh. Well, I'm following everything and I'm jumping from lily pad to lily pad with you here, and I'm trying to figure out, how I'm suffering with some of the luxuries. I don't want to lose them, right? But I don't have all the heavy artillery and the security system to keep them here. So part of me wants to have a divergent thought here, but I'm not sure how to approach it because I feel right now that everything you've shared, I feel like if love is what you're seeking, are you telling me that that is something that we can lose? And that is something that because we're seeking love, we're suffering?
I think it's more along, and I'm thinking in extremes because a lot of times the only way to really capture the full essence of something is in extremes. But if I have a stranglehold on my wife and I won't let her out of my sight and I have to be by her side at all times and I want her wherever I go, is that love? Is that meaning if I'm so bent on being secure in my relationship with my wife that I have to hold on to it, is that love? Or is it loving when I can be trusting and I can let that go and I can let my wife be who she is and explore life on her terms and not have to see eye to eye on every single thing that's going on in my world, but still be able to embrace her and love her despite our differences, or maybe because of our differences, and allow that to flourish, because that is what true relationship is. We experience this in front row dads. It's this idea of the ability to the yes and. It's our ability to sit with one another despite our differences and love one another. Now imagine if we started to raise up ideas or ideologies around front row dads that says it looks like this and it has to be this way. The moment that we start doing that is the moment that we actually start pushing people out because they're not conforming to the way that we want it to be, and we're starting to huddle around certain ideals of what it looks like. And then we're always trying to create boxes around that so that we can find ways to protect the identity that we're raising up within that as the way of being. And that's not freedom, that's not loving. It's loving is the idea that when it rains on the good and it rains on the evil.
Okay. Well, so let me rein it back in here to summarize what I've just feel that I've put some dots together here with your mentality of being curious and being open to what's happening next and the whatever's coming, yes, and being inclusive. With that, love can take any form, and I appreciate the way that you made that distinction for us because love could look this way to some person over here. It could be, being very close and having the day by day connection where you are texting each other back and forth all the time. It can be very tight like that, or it can be very open and what you would call trusting, where we don't need to do that. It can be any way it needs to be for
Yeah.
anyone.
and
So
and
it's curiosity, it's yes and
it is,
uh
yeah.
okay.
And I
Well,
think really just to differentiate a little bit on that is that I think that the idea of when we have to hold on to something, and we place our identity in it, and it actually keeps someone else from being free to be who they are. I wouldn't call that the definition of love. In fact, it's what we would call abuse in most relationships. When it's now the texting back and forth and the intimacy that we can create and how that plays out is totally free. But it's when we start having a stranglehold on something, when we start trying to control the behaviors and the way that somebody else does and lives this life, that we it gets on the edge of first and foremost not loving ourselves, because we're not able to love ourselves or see ourselves outside of something that exists outside of us, that person. And it keeps us from truly expressing the fullness of what it means to be messy, forgiveness, caring for one another in compassion. And so I think we just have to be careful in our world of start I mean, this is why we have such a split in our world right now, Matt, is that we have this idea that everything has to be completely right or wrong, and then everybody has their definition of what that looks like. And that's not very loving, and we can see that play out in the way things happened on January 6th of, what was it, 20, which happens to be my birthday, by the way. It's like a sad thing to, to see play out on your birthday. But at the Capitol, where people are raising up and ready to go and take over something about that's built on ideologies, belief systems, as though we know. And there's just there's this place in our world where we begin to have to understand that we don't know everything and we don't have all the answers, and that it's going to be messy, and my marriage is going to have ups and downs. We're going to fight, and then we need to forgive, and then we need to have intimacy, and then we need to and we have this cycle of things, and over time that's freedom. It's the freedom for it to go to all the different places it needs to go in order for it to continue to grow and be what it truly needs to be. And I mean, I think you would probably agree with me. I want my wife to be happy. And if I ever am the reason why she is not truly able to find joy in this world, and I am limiting her in any way, at least for me, I want her to be free from me. I want her to be free to be able to leave. And it's in that where the excitement and joy of life comes. That's the roller coaster ride. It's the I don't know if this is going to be able to make it. It's the uncertainty of, is this going to go off the rails? That's where true life happens. It's in that tension between the what, the good and the bad.
okay.
So
So in that tension between the good and the bad, where love can happen, where joy or sadness can happen, what you are sharing in your message overall is that in that space of that duality, that's where life is. That's where the true joy can be found. And there's going to
yes.
be sadness too. You're going to have both. There's no middle ground that we should be seeking. We should be able to accept that joy or that sadness and live life with love either
Or
way.
maybe there is the seeking, and this is where the challenge comes in. Seeking the middle ground is probably where, or the overlap of life. It's
Okay.
how can we fall into this place of recognizing the I don't knows instead of making bold claims of everything we think we know. You know,
Okay.
it's it's man, I'm trying to think of a practical example, and yet it gets really hairy, which is part of the challenge of being that I face is that most of the time I want to deal with the heavy, hard hitting issues. Um, but but there's an over.
It sounds
Let's.
like it because you've
I
gone
know.
pretty deep.
Yeah. No. I mean, I do. I've told you. I don't know how to swim in shallow waters. I
Well,
really have struggled with that.
well, let's bring it back to something you shared that was very, I mean, potential for great emotion in the very beginning. I mean, it kind of got me welled up thinking about it. The first thing that came out of your mouth earlier was you were talking about this challenge of finding out your wife has cancer, and that's something that we'd never talked about before. I'd love to, if you're comfortable with it, I'd love to kind of dive into that. You know, what are we facing right now with that? What's the challenge, and what's it teaching you now, Les?
Well, on the one hand, I have to recognize that it's not that the cancer is not something I'm personally struggling with. And so when I say this and I'm talking about my wife, um, there are some very real emotions that she may not be in the same place as I am, or and vice versa. She's got challenges, and yet she's got some comforts around that I don't have. So but the way that my way of dealing with this is honestly to just be listening. um, and I know that she has struggled deeply with this. And thankfully, this is not a death sentence. This is chronic myeloid leukemia is something that is very treatable. It's a bone marrow situation where it just can make all sorts of pain and inflammation occur, and so she's just been in a lot of pain. And this is after in 2016 having had a stroke, and so she's no we are together. We are no strangers to suffering. She has had her share of the one who's dealt with it mostly physically, and which has created emotional traumas as well. Um, and but when it comes to how this has played out, is thankfully, which is a funny thing to say as well, after the stroke, we saw what kind of teacher it was. We saw how life's curriculum transitioned for us into what is life teaching us, and it drew us closer. It's helped her appreciate the goodness of life in ways that um, I think a lot of people miss when everything seems to be easy, when everything physically seems to be going well. Um, she is incredibly driven by health herself, and always has been, and she learned very quickly that she thought that I mean, I remember when she woke up from the stroke, for example, the first words out of her mouth, and I didn't know what I was going to wake up to, what was the question of, what did I do wrong? She had a stroke, and her first questions are, what did I do wrong? And I think that we live in a world where there's this perception that we have to do all these things particularly right, and that there's some particular right way to live life, and that when we experience something that is like suffering or consequences or crisis, that we have done something wrong, rather than just understanding that life just has kind of got its own life has got its own life. it, this whole thing is I just got up and hugged her and was just thrilled to hear her voice, because I literally didn't know what I was going to wake up to. That morning, it was like 5 in the morning. Um, and so I think there was just an appreciation. So I just told her, man, you did nothing wrong. And I just, this is, we have no idea why this has occurred, and we're going to figure it out, and we're going to work through this. And we did. And it was a journey, and it's the same thing now. There's a lot of questions about what's the right path for treating this cancer. And and there is no right path, and you can always change your path. You can always decide to do a different type of treatment. And so she wants to, I think, that's all wrapped up in a fear of life ending. That's end of suffering. and that there's this stigma of suffering and this stigma of crises and things that happen in our world that our news makes so, I mean, really think about how much the media makes such a big deal out of all the stuff that is happening in our world to the nth degree because for the sake of entertainment, but it creates fear within us. And it's fear of dying, it's fear of sickness, it's fear of suffering and all these things. Rather than us being able to explore those things, they tell us what we're supposed to believe about them, they tell us what the outcomes are supposed to believe. And when you're in it though, you have to start shutting those voices off, and you have to start asking for and seeking truth about, what does this really mean? Did I do something wrong? Is there something more to this that's going on? Is there something about this that there's a lesson in? And so we've just been seeking those lessons, and they're not easy. And some days, it's miserable, and other days it's an incredible. Last night had an incredible joyful moment with her, in terms of just talking about like every single experience, my your health and my health represent health for her, and her sickness represents our own sickness. When we start to get outside of our individual selves, when we stop being so narrowly focused on making sure I do every single thing right today, that I get to do no matter what, at all costs, I succeed, I will win, I will, all the things that we sometimes get focused on in the West, the very masculine energy, it loses sight of the nurturing side of the very feminine energy. And we need both of those things. And so she represents for us that nurturing, that side, which I am now living into the nurturing for her, caring for her. And that's not my gift, but I get to exercise that, which makes me a more whole human. And in that moment when I'm healthy, she's able to highlight that and say, I'm so grateful for you and how you are currently expressing your health and your journey. And and it's in that full picture that she doesn't feel alone, that she feels like she's being supported, and that she feels, and I feel supported because I get to support her. It's that expression of our oneness as humans, that when we can begin to start unifying around the collective situation, then we grow into a more whole human being and a whole oneness, something beyond human being. It's where we start to begin to live life as a part of creation, and experience the full joys of it.
Wow. Well, Les, you've gone as expected. You've gone super deep. I think we're way down here in the Marianas Trench. We're in the deepest waters known to humankind right now. I'd love to bring it back up. Let's come back up to the level just a little bit below the water. And I'd love to ask you about, as you're fighting all these challenges with, well, your wife's health. You said she had a stroke, and now recently the cancer. How are you responding, reacting, leading as a parent in this time? I mean, how do you keep up, the face or the attitude when it comes to parenting your four children?
Well, I'm real. I I mean, when it sucks, it sucks. And when I make mistakes as a result of being caught up in my own emotion or my own feelings, it's an opportunity for me to ask for forgiveness. And I really do believe that we exist for the purposes of creating a world together, that where we I have a saying, um, that we exist to uh, take the paintbrush of love, the colors of chaos, that are on, and mixing them on the palette of life, for the purpose of creating the masterpiece, PEACE, that we desire. And it's that essence of love and forgiveness that creates that compassionate opportunity. And the chaos is, like, the chaos as the colors is a real key to this, that when we are having those chaotic moments, it's an opportunity for us to make something out of it, not get stuck in it, not drown in the paint colors, but to really be able to find ways to create something new out of it. I mean, this is what nature does, right? It's like a seed falls from a tree and dies, so that it can then create something else, another tree. And fire burns up things, and then in its place, it is the fertilizer for the next thing to grow. And that's what is nature, and we have that within us. We have that within us.
I want to I want to highlight something you just shared here for our audience, and I took a note here. When we're having chaos, make something of it. I love that. I think that's amazing. So whenever things are getting thrown at you 100 miles an hour and they're curveballs and it's the most challenging thing or it's the easiest thing, whatever it is that's thrown at you, whatever chaos comes your way, make something of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I'm going to get real about myself right now, because I think that that's an important piece for me to be honest with, is that I do speak very esoteric sometimes, all the time. I get it all the time, and it's honestly one of the things that has created the deepest challenge and struggle for me. Because I just, I'm not saying it in a special way. I've begged God and source or whatever to remove the way that I think about about life. Just make it simple. Like, let me just be a white 48-year-old middle class male Republican or liberal. I don't care. We can go either direction. Just make it simple for me so that I can just cling to something. And it just doesn't work. And it puts me in a place where I have felt alone. It has created trauma from me, from the perspective of being in business with powerful men and women, to being someone who really wants to push the limits of love and open the doors to everyone to just be loved. Um, and I have often felt like I very alone in all that. And some of my own traumas and the challenges that I faced, even with my wife. I mean, sometimes, the way I see the world drives her insane because of the fact that everything is so, let me tell you a story and, blah, blah, blah. I mean, and I am learning to embrace this side of me in a way that has been challenging. And I think that there are a ton of people in our world who desire to be able to start to think outside of the boxes that they've been put in. And at the core of my being, that's what I want so desperately. And yet I also am afraid. I'm afraid of continually standing outside, looking in on people who seemingly are happy and dressed right and look right and successful and all these things. And I'm afraid that I can't make a living doing it. And I'm afraid that all those things still play out in my own mind. And I am coming to a place right now where the depth of what I mean, this is the reason that I exist. I exist for the purpose, I believe, of just of showing people that they can be free to be who they are. And that means that, the the most limiting belief that someone may have, um, it is true for them. And it is true for me too. I just also have, and others have, they're beginning to have maybe seen a bigger picture, and that truth or that belief that some of us have about whatever it is just a small piece of the picture. And I just want to be able to help people expand that picture in such a way that they're starting to see more of life, experience more joy, not to get caught in the 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 lines of dogma that simply say, if you are suffering, if you are poor, if you are broken, if something's going on with you, you've done something wrong. I want to help people to see the chaos that they're feeling, and help them establish ways of creating the life that they want from that, because that is so valid and so important for all of our stories.
Yes, you wanna help them, you exist to show people they can be free, you wanna help them see, that they can be free of this, they can be in chaos and be free of those shackles. What what are you doing yourself to free yourself from this? Because it seems like something that you definitely struggle with yourself. How are you freeing yourself, or what's the process you're using to work on freeing yourself, Les?
Well, curiosity continues to be my key for one. And it's really just beginning to it is working with people and coaches um, and other alternative plant-based substances that I've done in the past. I'm just willing to go down any path that is available, that that is represented by love. Like, the only, we'll call it law, only dogma, if you will, is that it has to be loving. It has to be with an intent of something bigger than myself. And that, so if I'm working with someone, I want to know that they are someone who's not just, you know, I'm not just hiring them to fill their pocketbooks, but that they recognize that they are in this for the greater good of all. And when I can work with more people like that, and I can start to listen to other people's stories, and literally the name of my company is Epic Fusion. It's where our stories become fused together. And when stories are fused together, when my suffering is fused with your suffering, my suffering feels lighter, and energetically it puts off light, literal light, that then it helps other people begin to see their story as valid and good as a part of the greater story. And so when we can do that with one another, and when I do that for myself, it's knowing you. It's why I'm a part of Front Row Dads, because when I'm with you guys, all of the things that I've struggled with, where I'm at with my kids and being about to be an empty nester, it's in service to the greater good of Front Row Dads. It's allowing me to help other dads realize that this thing that they feel so chaotic about is an opportunity for them to find incredible joy and love and grow closer to their kids, rather than to start to create rules that try to manipulate and control the situation for their own, for them to feel like, oh, look, my kids are upstanding citizens. No, man, it's like, let's get this shit messy. Let's let's understand that life is just messy and it's fun in that state. I mean, there's a reason why we do things like the Tough Mudder and run hard races and do stuff that, like where we get to just be playful and be kids. It's because that's where the essence of life is for us. And so,
Yes, it feels like the environment you're creating or the environment you seek to create or be a part of with Epic Fusion, with Front Row Dads, with anything you're a part of is an environment where curiosity is championed, where we can come together and lay off any shackles of needing to be a certain way, look a certain way, just be open, curious towards some vision, some purpose. And if the purpose is, say, it's Front Row Dads, or the purpose is, how you serve people through Epic Fusion, it's when we're in alignment and purpose and we're open and curious, we can find love. We can find.
yeah, it's my commitment is to be transparent in that endeavor. Is to say, you know, it is to own the fact that I am esoteric and be proud of the fact that I bring that to the table, while at the same time being completely transparent about the fact that I'm struggling to do it, to that it's messy, that I have my own fears. But the way that I deal with my fears is that I go head into them. We're going into a for Dad's event next week, right? And I'm already setting the intention to be completely, I mean, all the guys will not appreciate this if I literally do this, but to be completely naked, to be like, yeah, man, my life is a struggle right now. To allow for the fact not to pretend like I am some sort of trauma-free, hero that's going to show up and save the day of anybody or what. But no, it's just that I'm going to contribute real life experiences to the fullness of the group, that they're also going to be willing to do the same. And when the tendency is, as you know, it's a powerful group of men. The tendency, or the temptation, I should say, is to put on a facade, to put on a mask that allows a certain side of me to be seen, so that others may look up to me or think of me a certain way, so that I can achieve some goal or some outcome in my life that I think is important to me, the things that I'm clinging to. I want to go out like this. I want to be open for my ego to be challenged. I want to be open for my bullshit to be called out. I want to be, because I think it's then that I can truly experience love, both giving it and receiving it. Because there's nothing that you will ever find. You're never going to be able to look at me and when I run for the president one day, that's not going to happen. And pull out a bunch of stuff and say, oh yeah, well you did this when you were, and you did this and you did this. I'm going to be like, I've always said I've done that. That's always been there. There's never been a moment that it hasn't been there. What else do you want to say? I'm owning my stuff. What are you hiding? That you feel like you got to point it out. So that is where I want to be in my life, not just with Front Row Dads, but in every aspect of my life. And my suffering comes when I'm not true to that. My suffering comes when I start to hold on to the things that I try to protect myself with.
What I'm hearing is the future vision, what you're creating in your life, what you seek to create in the lives of others, is a place where they go head into their fears with openness, with curiosity, and lay it all on the line and play all in. And when they do that, they have the chance to be authentic. They have a chance to find love, and that is where this duality, this joy, this sadness, the left, right, whatever the duality is. That's where they can see that, they can embrace it, they can learn to love through it. Oh, and a quick a service announcement: Front Row Dads retreats are not naked retreats. Just want you to know that, everyone out there. But back to it
This is
is
true.
that we are creating an environment where Openness, curiosity, that can help us get to a place of love.
Totally.
And that's how you deal head on with challenges and fears, is openness, curiosity, and play all in.
Yes. Yes. And there's a statement that in our world that, not in our world, there's a statement that I heard recently that if you can name the problem, you already understand the solution. And I think that that's a real key to this is that when I go around and I hide my problem and I don't name it out loud, I'm actually denying any opportunity for myself to succeed at finding a new way to approach it. I actually am limiting my ability to come to new outcomes in this world. So I think that's a really important key for any of us that are out there trying to make it in this life and find ways to be successful. And because then we start to uncover other ideas about what success looks like. It becomes more about just that relational aspect because it really, literally, it's only about me and you and other people that we surround ourselves with. That is the only way we actually understand our existence. There is no existence without the rest. And until we can be free to be that, then there's no way for us to truly appreciate life.
Well, let's name a problem then. Let's do one quick exercise, then we'll wrap up with our last question. If you can name the problem, you can understand the solution. Let's say the problem, for example, is I'm a 48-year-old husband with several children, and I have a wife who's been diagnosed with cancer recently, and that whatever that is, that's if that's the problem, right? Is these life things, these challenges, then help me understand what's the solution.
So in that moment, the solution comes down to there is nothing to fix. That in this cancer, that the opportunity here is for me to love my wife unconditionally. That healing comes when I can help her understand she's not broken. That healing comes when it's not about the cancer at all, but it's about the state of her own um, resistance or uh, welcoming of all that life has. And I don't do that by telling her. Like that sucks. When I do that, it just does not go well. Does not go well.
Yeah, it doesn't work well when we try to coach our spouses.
Right.
Public service announcement. Yes.
But when I represent an unconditional dedication and commitment to her, no matter what, when she is in the throes of this is awful, life sucks, I am angry, I'm mad that I hurt, and I just go in there and I can hug her and I can love on her and do so imperfectly. And then in return, when I have days where I am like, this sucks, that this is what's going on with you, and I'm angry that we have to spend our time and energy around something that I just wish I could take on for you or whatever, and she can look at me and she goes, it's going to be okay, and I love you for feeling that way, but it's going to be. That is where the solution is. It's not even in seeing cancer as the problem. The problem is that I see cancer as a problem. That's the problem. The problem is that I begin to think that it shouldn't be here. And so when I can just begin to embrace that this is what it's supposed to be, and now how does love express itself in this particular moment at its best, then I become a part of something that's the greater good for not just, it's not about me. Because let's be honest, why else would I not want cancer here? It's an inconvenience for me. I mean, more than anything, it's an inconvenience for me because this is the only way I know how to express my world. It interferes with, if she's not feeling good because of cancer, then guess what? My intimacy levels go down. Uh, her anger or her sadness goes up, which means I have to be available for that, and that interferes with my plans. And I mean, like, but if I can just let go of all that, if I can be open-handed about it and just allow it to be and then be responsive in the moment, then it begins to be something that is rewarding for both of us. And it allows us to now be experience love in a way that is whole. And I can't say, when we talk about oneness in marriage is literally just that freedom to be able to love one another unconditionally no matter what, to forgive, and to allow the chaos to be the thing from which we birth new creation from. And I will go back to that probably for the rest of my life. It is such a key piece of life for us. And we both we have moments where we're like, yeah, I wish we could get rid of that. But I think at the end of the day, with everything that we learn and everything that we come to and everything that all the things that we are growing in, like she'll tell you she would not want to go back and not have a stroke. What would we lose without that? What would we be missing in our relationship with ourselves, with our kids, with our
Yeah, yeah. That brings up a great point. I mean, every challenge that happens is an opportunity for wherever we're at to evolve, to be in the moment and be loving towards, our people in the moment. I love the thought here, and I believe it's one of the tenets of modern psychology. Is this thing that, learn to love and appreciate the things that you don't love, and they'll have no more power over you, and you can be present with them, and it's okay. And I love everything you've said. Unless I'd love to. Speaking of love. I'd love to build a bridge here to our last question. And I know we can go on for hours because we have before, and we already have today. And let's let's go to something very specific and tangible. The last question I'd love to ask, and I'd like to give you a runway on this one. Uh, just maybe we say, take a minute or a few to think about and share. If there were a piece of advice you have to someone out there, someone who has a challenge that they have endured, they're overcoming, someone that who wants to create an exciting future. Any piece of advice, any one specific piece of advice you love to offer, we'd love to listen.
I think what I would it goes to a lot of what we're saying here. I think there are a lot of people who are really suffering today who feel very alone in that suffering, who feel isolated, who feel like they're broken, like there's something wrong with them. And it's a lot of it because they've got this idea of what they are supposed to be, what life is supposed to be for them. And I think the question becomes is how can you see your suffering in service to the rest of humanity? How can you begin to ask the questions of what teaching does our entire world need today that can be taught as a result of what you were going through with your own suffering? Because I think right there in that space is the place where your suffering becomes shared, not where you feel alone. Because it's easy to get sucked inward on suffering and want to become reclusive and cover up and become dark and stay in the darkness. But we need that suffering. We need you to share that story, because when your story becomes that a part of my story, it energetically creates light for the rest of us to begin to find more hope, more joy, more life, and we get to surround you with that. So um, it's really about how can you integrate your suffering into life so that we may be able to see the light that's in you through it.
Wow. Awesome. You did not disappoint today. You went so many places today, all back to the theme of love and being able to accept with an open heart and with a curious mind whatever's happening right now, not as a problem, but as an opportunity, to lean closer into the people we care about and to serve the world. And I love the message today, Les. It's one of the reasons I love you. Can you share one last thought? I'm going to ask you to share how people might connect with you if they want to find you on any social media or website. How do people find out more about Les?
Sure. Well, first and foremost, you can email me. Don't put me on your spam emails if you're actually listening to this and like, oh, well, there's somebody else I can put on my list. But no, email me. I mean, Les, which is with one S, at epicfusion.life. That's EPIC fusion, FUSION.life. My website, which is about to launch here soon, is epicfusion.life as well. You can check me out on all my social channels, which is Less is More Life or Less is More.life. Facebook, I got a page there, Instagram, all those things. Less is more, all with one S. I had to adopt the affirmation of less is more to overcome being less in my life.
Yeah, that's clever. I like that. I like that.
uh,
Can you share with our audience? One thing just came to mind. Can you share with our audience, what does your license plate look like?
Ah, it says my license plate. I can't show it to you, but it says Love WNZ, which everybody goes, "What does that mean?" I go, "Love wins." It
Love
30
wins.
is so that when I'm honking at you and screaming at you and giving you the finger, you can look at my license plate and you can know that love wins. So love me so that you can overcome all things.
Hopefully, not too many people are screaming at you
Oh, I know
as
that
you
doesn't happen.
go by them in that big truck.
I don't. Yeah, no,
uh,
that doesn't happen. I'm just,
awesome.
love wins is the key. That is it for all of us.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Les, for taking the time to share with our team today. And we love you, much appreciated, and look forward to seeing you at the retreat soon. Well, so here's the bonus. And this is not anything that needs to be super structured. We're not going to edit out any ums. The bonus is really simple. It's your opportunity to create a message. And there's two questions I'm going to ask you in the bonus here. The first question I'd like to ask and give you a moment, exchange style, to collect your thoughts. You don't have to fire off at the hip. You can take a moment to collect your thoughts. But the first question is, if there's someone in your world that you would like to appreciate, someone that's had an impact that may not get the appreciation they deserve, who would that be and why? What would you like to say to that person? That's the first thought. And then the second and deeper thought, well, it could be a deeper thought. But the second thought would be, today is April 21st, 2022. Let's go forward in the future and let's imagine that it is now April 21st, 2023, 1 year from now. If it's 1 year from now, what would less of the present like to tell less of the future? Any message you want to deliver to your future self that could be relevant, that you'd like your future self to know? What would you like yourself in a year from now to know? Those are a couple thoughts to chew on for a moment. A message of appreciation to someone. And what would you like to tell your future self a year from now?
Well, evidently, this is the person I need to appreciate because I can't let them off my mind. Um, I think it's my dad, but it's kind of a weird appreciation. Um, he is not very healthy right now. I think he gave up on life, uh, seeking to create out of the chaos of his life. I think he gave up on that. Probably, man, maybe 15 to 20 years ago. And I saw him. I mean, I have the courage to be curious. I have the courage to go explore. I have the courage to go chase after dreams, and um, I have the courage to risk things in my life because I saw him do that. Um, and at the same time, his giving up on life many years back. Um, and when I say that, it just looks like he's kind of rolled over and took an easy, you know, hourly job that didn't pay the bills, that made them struggle financially, and all these things. But there's something about that is both it's frustrated me and has been a driver for me in my life to not allow that to happen. And I've also have begun to come to this appreciation of how my dad lives now, which is, and it's not perfect. It's, I mean, he likes, he has his routines, he has these things about it, but there's some sense of peace about him. Like just a willingness to just let, I don't know. I can't completely put my finger on it, but he is a marker in my life. He is a way mark in my life, and he got me to a certain point down the path. And this is just coming to me for the first time. And now I'm kind of getting to explore uncharted territories because I recognize that he was able to get it down to this far, and then now I'm able to take it and explore even further. And I hope that I can just do that for my kids. That's how we live on. However long he lives his life, that it'll continue to live. That he will continue to live. That's all that can happen. And that that I'm just instilling in my kids and their kids, that my legacy is one that I will take you further down the path than I was taken. And I'll go through the uncharted territories and then get you to this certain point. And then at some point, it's up to you to continue to chart new territory. And I
Mm,
just really appreciate him for that. And I often chase
awesome.
that in a stream of fear rather than that. So that's a really interesting analogy and metaphor that I'm going to continue with. Thank you for that question.
Awesome. I
Then
hope
what do
that there's some action that you can maneuver with, thinking about him and appreciating him.
totally,
Um,
totally. I
yeah,
mean,
that's good.
I literally have, will take it to the next level and explain to him that very thing. And I think he will appreciate it.
Awesome.
And we have a great relationship. It's just oftentimes I find myself a little sad when I'm with him because of just the life that he used to, you know, and he still has it. He's still there. It's just not nearly as vigorous as it used to be. But
Hmm.
um,
Okay.
and then the
Message
second,
to yourself in a year.
a message to myself. Um, it's funny. I did this in reverse. I did a 5 years, 5 years of later. I'm calling it a note to self is what I call them now. 5 years down the road, that guy's talking to me now, and I've done that. I haven't done it in
That's
reverse.
usually the way this exercise
Yeah,
works. It's a little
yeah,
curveball.
it is. Um, I think it would be more questions. Um, how did we do that? How did we get here? How did we? I'm assuming everything's all right if you're listening to this. um, but how did we get here? And I would ask that you just continue to be that guide for me. Um, there's been a lot of hurt and a lot of pain that we have been experiencing, and we're in the middle of working through it now. And I hope that today is in service to you. I hope that today is in service to everything that you have that we are dreaming today. I hope that we are starting to um, really embody and live confidently into what we've always dreamed for our entire life, because I know how long it's been just waiting for this to come about, to feeling like it needs to be orchestrated just right, and yet it's just messy. And I hope that that we can continue to not try to latch on to, yeah, just don't latch on to what it is today. Don't don't get tempted to hold on to what it is today. Instead, just continue to be curious, continue that curiosity, and let it be the thing that allows us to just never lose our the existence that we desire, that life that invigorates us. Because the moment that we lose that, we might as well go ahead and move on to the next plane, because there's not much left for here for us. So